Yeah, go on.
I have a question.
Yep.
We were talking about the emptiness.
Yep.
Is it wrong to say that emptiness is pretty much the same as no projection, not projecting? But in
Okay, we say no projecting, we have to define what we mean by that, and finally when it comes down to it, you could argue, but you've got to define it first.
Oh.
No projecting, we just use it in a very general way, but it goes far more. I mean, you sort of could say that, but it's too loose.
Yeah.
It's not precise enough.
No.
Not nearly precise enough. But that's the approach.
Yeah, yeah.
The general attitude of Buddha is saying is, as Lama puts it, as I said before, that the delusions in general, all of them, decorate on top of what is there, layers upon layers of characteristics that aren't there. So that is projecting, yes, sure, but to a much more radical degree than we could ever imagine in the West. You understand?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Why not? Anything else? Yes.
I heard someone else in the discussion saying that even just having the intellectual understanding or insight that there is no landlord when you're into some no landlord or no inherent I. That even just knowing it intellectually can be of some help.
Oh my God, yes. Of course. There's no question. Because you look at how we, this is what they say it's this gradual, the word meditation actually is very interesting. We have our own views of it, in the West we have a very vivid view of what we think it is, and it's generally the usual view of meditation somehow has no thoughts, it's very cliche. So the fact is that the Tibetan word to meditate, the verb, is the verb to familiarize. It gives a very different take. So meaning, and if you ask the question then to the Buddha, well, what are you familiarizing your mind with? Because familiarizing is your mind becoming familiar with something. It's completely not what we think about. Well, with two things. That which is true and that which is virtuous. The fact is this. So there's various levels of meditation. Literally using that word. You've got to familiarize yourself first by listening to the theory of music. You've got to listen to what Bach says. You've got to learn the notes and what musical theory is, isn't it? Then you think about it. And even just thinking about the musical theory already is so insightful. And then you have to play it. And you have to go through that process. When you learn mathematics, you have to first listen. Then you think about it. And then you can eventually become familiar with it and start doing it and being creative. Well, the fact is, everything we've ever learned in our world is exactly that process. But we're shocked almost to hear that that's the exact same process we use to do the job we're talking here, to become a Buddha. Because we have these fantasies of what we think we're supposed to do, or what we think meditation is. We think it's mystical and strange and abstract. And it's our misconceptions that are the problem. When you think of it this way, getting enlightened is it's the same process as becoming a violinist. You listen to the theory, you think about it, and of course it's powerful. If you can say the words intellectually about emptiness, a little bit, even the bit that I'm saying here, but I never go through years and years of trying to listen to it and study it and think about it and practice it and having to talk about it. I can say a few words about it, right? So hopefully every word I've said here is not a lie. I mean, it's really serious problems if I'm telling you mathematics and I'm saying the wrong things. It's irresponsible. So I've got to be saying the right words. So even my ability to say any words, I'm not saying I've got any realizations of it, it's already very tasty. I see myself going over the years, since I had to start to teach, Lama's never told me to teach. Beginning I studied it, and you say it tentatively, and then I find myself, every time I say it, a little bit more clarity comes. Intellectually, it's very powerful. Don't ever underestimate intellectual clarity. It's the absolute stepping stone. The more you can understand the musical theory, you'll pass your exam in your theory. You'll get top marks in theory. You haven't played a note on piano yet. Don't think that's not good. But if you forget to play the piano, then you're in trouble. You see what I'm saying? And that's our biggest danger, I think, in spiritual practice. We tend to have two extremes. Some people think, oh, it's only about practice. I don't want to hear about the theory. That's just intellectual. I want to practice. Then other people say, say, you know, you get caught up in thinking you're so clever, knowing all the words, but you forget to practice. And that's our big danger. So we've got to put them both together. You can't just know the theory and forget to play the piano, and you can't just sit there with your hands on the piano thinking that Bach will channel through you and perfect music will come. Don't be, it's a superstition. Same here. So meditate means familiarise your mind with listening, thinking about it, and eventually experiential, direct, you know. So there's no question. You've got to have intellectual clarity first. No question. But again, remember, there are two kinds of meditation, two kinds of practitioners. Some people, their minds, you know, they do practice first and purify their minds and do the, you know, the nundros and things, and then some experience will come, and then they can articulate. So different people, but the method we're discussing here is this method of first theory, listen, think about, analyze, experience, you know, that process. Yeah. What else? Things to talk about. There's no one missing, we're all here. I think have a look at Some people are not coming back.
Yeah.
Some people left.
Yeah,
Coming back.
Huh?
I think some of those that aren't here thought it to start by 6 again.
No, I understand that. I was just thinking
Yeah,
though, I
so,
thought,
yeah,
no, I do
coming
understand because I
back,
was starting a bit
yeah,
early.
yeah.
But I thought some people were saying they're not coming back. No.
I think I know one.
Andrea is.
So who's missing then? Besides her, who's missing?
Here's one.
Lena and Barbara.
Okay.
And this
All right, I understand.
here.
Okay, so then what to do? I'm sorry. Okay. 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 So in the Heart Sutra here, in the second column, halfway down, first of all, just the 5 aggregates, the 18 constituents, the 5 senses, the 6 senses, the 6 objects, and the 6 sense bases, as they're called. And then it mentions the 12 links, and it doesn't mention all. It says there's no ignorance, and then it says there's no extinction of ignorance. So what that means is this. Ignorance is the first one of the 12 links, isn't it? So within, remember that the beginning of the sentence is that within emptiness there is no, and then it repeats them all. The key phrase to not forget is within emptiness there is no. So within emptiness there is no ignorance. But then it says no extinction of ignorance. So all that means is, given that we are practicing this path, and we are trying to remove this ignorance, the root delusion, the maripa, the ego grasping from the mind, which is what happens when you realize emptiness, then obviously when you cut ignorance, there would be extinction of ignorance, isn't there? So there is a state called ignorance, and then when you realize emptiness, there will now be a state called the extinction of ignorance. You agree? So extinction of ignorance exists, yes? And ignorance exists, yes? So obviously, they're both empty. So all it means is there is no ignorance, and there's also the absence of ignorance. There's no absence of ignorance. So just making sure that even when you've got rid of emptiness, got rid of ignorance, that too is empty. That's all it's saying. That too is empty. Because everything is independent arising. And then it says so on, up to and including no aging and death, and then no extinction of aging and death. Same thing. We started a bit early.
Okay, sorry.
No, please, I'm sorry. Just a little bit. So it's just making sure that we know that whatever exists, including blue on that cup, and including the absence of red on that cup. Absence of red exists, right? And blue exists, right? They're both phenomena that do exist. And they're both empty of inherent existence. So in other words, emptiness itself is also empty. That's all it's saying. That's all it's saying. It's not complicated. It's not cosmic. The key thing, the more you understand the way they talk in Buddhist philosophy, you first establish that something exists. This is what conventional truth means. You've got to establish that something exists. And there's various terms for that which exists. Phenomenon, object, existent, established base, object of knowledge. And remember, the definition of one of those synonyms, the definition of an existent really showing you Buddha's view. This is not the way we think in the West. You know? To establish that something exists in the West, you'd be establishing something existing out there as a cup or of this or of that people can cognize and see. We'd establish something existing out there. That's exactly what we do in science. But here, the definition, listen to it, the definition of that which exists is that which can be cognized by mind. It's axiomatic that that which exists is that which can be cognized by mind. It's very tasty. So whatever the mind can cognize, and that means you've got to establish it conventionally, label it, define it, fulfill its definition, check there's no other valid cognition that contradicts, then you've established it exists conventionally. So that which can be cognized by mind, everything that exists is a thing that can be cognized by mind. And so if the absence of red can be cognized by your mind, it exists. It's an abstract phenomenon, but it does exist, doesn't it? Because another way that you learn in Buddhist psychology, that you've got mind, and that's called subject, and it always has an object. Whatever level of mind, the grossest to the most subtle, necessarily, by definition, a state of mind has an object that it cognizes, has something that it cognizes. So whenever there's a state of mind, it has something it cognizes. Even when it's the subtlest mind cognizing emptiness, and they say the subject and object are like mixed with water, like water mixed with water. There's no longer a distinction between subject-object. But still there's a subject that learns to cognize the object. So whatever is existing is something that can be cognized by mind. It's axiomatic. This is why for the Buddha, what mind is utterly central. Because everything finally comes from mind. So, absence of red is a phenomenon that does exist. Why? It can be cognized by my mind. Blue does exist. Why? Because it can be cognized by mind. So, emptiness of inherent I can be cognized by my mind. Therefore, emptiness of inherent I is a phenomenon, is an object of knowledge, is an existent. So therefore, Buddha's saying everything that exists is empty of existing inherently. So if emptiness of I is a phenomenon that exists, it too is empty of inherent existence. It's not tricky, you just got to hear it. This is Buddha's fundamental point. There can be nothing that exists that isn't empty of existing inherently, which means there can be nothing that exists which is not a dependent arising. Everything that exists arises in dependence upon something. These two are like utterly, sort of like rock solid, you know. You get the two truths and you can never become nihilistic and you'll never become eternalistic. It's incredible, you know. And that leads to the middle way. Middle way is these two together. Right now we're way, way away from the middle way. It's like I never read it, but I heard about Harry Potter's platform 9 3/4. You know, you've got platform 9 or platform 10, and you can't find 9 3/4. That's middle way. That's the middle way.
Does that mean that emptiness cannot exist without phenomenon?
Speak it out more.
I just thought about what you said.
Yeah.
That even emptiness itself is empty of inherent existence.
Right. So,
and to me, this leads back to that it's also dependent arising.
of course, that's right.
That's
Of course
what
it
I
is.
thought.
Of course it is.
I just want to
Because it's a phenomenon.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenon that does exist. Emptiness of inherent existence of a cup does exist. You agree?
Yes.
Okay. So the emptiness of inherent existence of that cup is an existent phenomenon that can be known by the mind. So therefore it's empty. Of course it is. How can it not be? It's a dependent arising. Because dependent arising and empty completely go together. There can't be a dependent arising that isn't empty, and there can't be an emptiness that isn't dependent arising. Because they're just different ways of saying the same thing.
Yes, that's right.
And this is why hearing this, and this is why hearing the Heart Sutra, you can never become nihilistic. Never, if you get these two. That's why the two truths is the most tasty way to understand emptiness. You will never become nihilistic.
Of course, it's one thing to understand it on a certain level, but go deeper and deeper.
But we know that. It's the same as musical theory. Don't put yourself down because you know the musical theory. It's like, oh, you know, you've got to now play it. Don't worry about it. You'll know it first. Be happy. Be delighted.
Yes,
Of course. Of course, it's one thing.
I'm trying to think.
That's right. No, it's true. But be delighted. You can understand it intellectually. Be happy. Be over the moon. Laugh up and jump up and down and have a party. So now it says, then there's no exalted wisdom. And exalted wisdom is the wisdom that realizes emptiness, the perfection of wisdom. And then there's no attainment of that wisdom. And also, there's no non-attainment. Just to make sure we get it clear, non-attainment, all it means is, what wisdom, okay, again, we define, what is wisdom? Wisdom is the state of mind that realizes emptiness. That's exalted wisdom. It's perfected it, right? It's realized the perfection of wisdom. And then, we know we have to attain that wisdom, don't we? We have to attain the wisdom, obviously. Well, there's no, the attainment of wisdom does exist. Well, then that attainment of wisdom is empty. Therefore, there is no attainment of wisdom from its own side. It's just, it sounds tricky, but it's not if you analyse. And of course, then there's that emptiness of attainment of wisdom, and that also is empty. Just double checking. And also, there is no non-attainment. There is no, there also, that the emptiness of attainment of wisdom is also empty of existing from its own side. Like that. So Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, meaning because there does exist the emptiness of attainment of wisdom, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. This is mind-boggling to us in the West. We don't hear it, they don't go on about it much in Buddhist psychology, but for us it's stupendous to hear this. Fear is the nature of all the delusions. It's their flavour. It's their home. Anxiety, worry, panic, fear is the nature of believing in an I and in all its voices, attachment, anger, pride, jealousy. That's its nature. It's just the way it is. When we start to see this, it's so insightful. That's why you have to have a courageous mind. To go beyond fear. As Lama says, when you realise emptiness, there is no fear. There's a lovely story Lama told. When he was a little boy, he was a Sherpa. And he was recognised as a little boy as the reincarnation of one previous Nyingma yogi called Courtin. This little old layman, humble, unassuming, like all these great practitioners, you know, very poor, the previous life, Courtin. And he would, you know, trade salt between Tibet and around Mount Everest area. Anyway, as he got older, like a lot of these people, they then kind of go and meditate for the rest of their life. So there was this little hole in the wall near his village where they stored the radishes. So he pulled out the radishes and he moved in, you know. That became his home. So he was known as the Radish Lama, Laudo Lama. He's known as the Radish Lama. There's a little village now called Laudo, since Lama Zopa was born. Anyway, when he was a little boy, his sister said that the moment their mother would turn her back, little Zopa, he was crawling up the hill to where they knew the cave was, you know, because he was born down below. He'd be crawling up the hill. Mummy would drag him home. And from the time he could talk, he'd be walking up the hill, and Mummy would bring him and say, "Come home." He'd say, "No, that is my home." And apparently all the games he would play as a little boy, he'd play the role of a lama. And he'd make mud pie tormas and mud pie bells and dorjis and have pujas, and he would announce he was going to invite all his benefactors, and he would list the benefactors, and they were the benefactors from his past life. So his mummy kind of figured, well, we better check up here. So she asked the local lama, they do their divinations, and it came out that, yes, it would seem this little person was known as, you know, the reincarnation of the Laudo Lama. Because this is the point, when these great yogis die, they die with complete control and have clear memory, especially when they're very small, you know. So anyway, the story he told, after he was recognised as the Laudo Lama, he was up in some monastery with his manager. They have managers, they're very professional, these reincarnated lamas. Anyway, he was up on this mountain and there was a big river. Strange people he'd never seen before. Probably Swedish. with kind of, I'm joking, Anglo-Saxon or wherever we are, pale-faced people with straw-coloured hair and pale eyes. He'd never seen people like this. He's a Sherpa, for God's sake. So he had this fascination to meet them, you know. So he was across the river, a very rickety little bridge and a very dangerous river, and his manager didn't want him to go, but he insisted. So he took his bowl of potatoes, he's about 8, and he walks across the bridge and he falls in the water. Of course, they don't teach swimming up there, so he's drowning, right? So it was the way he told the story was so interesting. He said, the head, meaning his own head, The head kept coming up to the surface. And he saw his manager running along the bank, you know, freaking out. And then he said, aha, the thought occurred to me. The person known as the Laudo Lama is about to die. And then he said, I didn't know anything about emptiness, which meant in that life he hadn't learned it yet, but we have to deduce from the way he behaved and from the words he used, and I'll describe, that of course he had realization of emptiness in his mind. He said, I didn't know anything about emptiness, but there was no fear. Meaning, and this is so shocking to us, that when you've got realized emptiness, when you know with certainty there is no inherent I in there, then the mind is blissful, the mind is clear, the mind is undisturbed. Therefore there can't be fear, there can't be grasping, there can't be attachment, there can't be anger and jealousy and all the other rubbish. There just can't be. It's impossible. There's no basis. So a person who has that realization, who's drowning, like in his case, you see, this is interesting. We think in the West that, you know, this scientific thing called instinct for survival, which is like a major scientific finding. They describe it there. Well, I think that's a brilliant term for ego grasping. When you're just driving along, relaxed, and someone comes and drives in front of you and nearly hits you, what rises? This incredible sense of panic, isn't it? We call it instinct for survival. The way we describe it in the West, if you didn't have this, you wouldn't survive. Animals would not survive. So that means we would assume the little person called Lama Zopa drowning, that's what would make him come to the surface for air. So if you'd watched him in the water, he'd be coming to the top for air, but his mind would be clear. There'd be, like I said, the observation came in his mind. He said, the thought occurred. The person known as a Laudo Lama is about to die. Now that way they talk, they say this is one of the really good ways to practice. Not clinging to the I. You're more objective in the way you analyse what's inside. And the better way to think to yourself is the person known as Robina is having a thing called a cup of tea. You wouldn't talk like this in conventional language. People think you're stupid. You would say, I. We'd normally go, I am drowning. And that would be the feeling. This total sense of panic, completely freaking out. Massive fear, right? Which we think is normal, but which Buddha would say is because of ego grasping. So, and then we think, well, if you didn't have instinct for survival, why you would just sink to the bottom of the river like a stone? Oh, well, I might as well drown. No, doesn't mean you can't survive, but the mind wouldn't be disturbed. It's very fascinating, isn't it? The mind wouldn't be disturbed. He would see what was going on as clearly as if he was walking along the street peacefully. The mind is not disturbed, because there's no ego grasping, therefore no fear, therefore no panic, therefore no attachment, therefore no anger. But in other words, you've got a crystal clear mind that can see exactly what's going on, and you'll be able to do whatever's necessary. That's when the mind has realised emptiness. I mean, who wouldn't like to be like this? I can't wait. This is Buddha's view. It's an outrageous view psychologically. But our trouble is it's all glossed over in nice holy terms, you know. Westerners don't even hear it. Western psychologists and scientists think it's some cliched rubbish. It's astonishing view, you know. Unheard of in our culture. But this is what he's saying. The person known as a Laudo Lama is about to die. There was no fear. That's amazing. Wow. And he survived. He survived. He's still around, you know. So, yeah. How marvellous not to have fear. My goodness. And this is why it's such an interesting exercise. Check when you're attached, when you're angry, when you're jealous, when you're depressed. Just look inside. It is in the nature of fear. It's just what anxiety is. Isn't it? You look at a person who's really shouting loud, angry. If you analyse it, and don't call it anger, but look at them, what you see is this person is having a huge mental breakdown. Their eyes are wide like saucers, isn't it? The words are coming out completely irrationally. They're hysterical with fear, in other words. Look at them. Can you see my point? We go, oh, well, they're just angry. We take it for granted, don't we? But the person's having a serious mental breakdown because attachment didn't get what it wanted. That's what it is, you know. No matter how bad the thing is, it sounds kind of cruel. It's like as if you've just been raped. And basically, why there's so much panic and fear? Because the I was attacked, because it's attachment and therefore fear. But if there were no fear, there wouldn't be any suffering. You know? This is too shocking to us. We can't hear this. We'd rather not hear it because we prefer to have victims. We like having victims to feel sorry for, you know. It's kind of interesting. If you look at all your ordinary delusions every day, fear is their taste. is informing all the others. Attachment is like its main voice. Attachment is frantic, and I mean frantic craving to get what that fantasy I wants. And I mean every second. The millisecond it doesn't get it, panic attack. Aversion, fear, guilt, blame, variations of it, depending on how strong, which build up. Then the other variations, jealousy, arrogance, low self-esteem. There's only these few, half a dozen. If you know these, you can assess most people, I tell you, using this Buddhist model. It's incredible, actually. Sounds so simple, but it's profound,
What would be the best antidote to low self-esteem?
This is very depressing to hear it, but low self-esteem is the flip side of arrogance. We have low self-esteem because we have arrogance. So arrogance is the over-exaggeration of our good qualities, and low self-esteem is the over-exaggeration of our bad qualities. So when we understand the very direct relationship between these, it's a bit embarrassing, because when we have low self-esteem, we don't think it's arrogance, we think it's the opposite. But it is. But if you could have a person who didn't have arrogance, they would never have low self-esteem. So they're very, very neat. And it's quite hard to see it, because, but another aspect I would say of low self-esteem is actually, interestingly, the function of masses of attachment, because attachment in its nature is dissatisfaction. And the closest way we experience that is that I am never enough. I don't have enough. Some people's attachment manifests, let's say, in wanting to eat all the time, or alcohol, yeah? A person, let's say, the extreme example, a person that gets up to, just addiction to eating, serious addiction to eating. That person, you'd probably, if you talk to them, there'd be a lot of low self-esteem. You hate yourself for never being able to say no to the food, isn't it? So you put yourself down, isn't it? Low self-esteem is a function, therefore, of thwarted attachment, and it's a function of aversion. It's aversion for yourself. So it's a function of deflated pride, and it's a function of anger. Both. There's both things there. Can you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm
thinking about precisely, that's what we have to do. Mostly it's aversion, hating ourselves. And why we hate, and it's interesting that in our culture, we've all got attachment and anger, okay? And if we think of normal anger, it's always onto other people. So a person who's always angry, always criticises this person and that person, everybody's always criticising out there. But if you begin to analyse, if that person starts to look into their mind, a person who's got lots of anger has to hate themselves. It's not possible that you have, because that would be virtuous. To appreciate yourself, you'd have to be virtuous. Virtue is a good quality. That means appreciating your own qualities, being content within yourself. You would not possibly have anger, would you? But some people have anger, but it goes in. And that's more quiet. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if I look at myself in my life, I had a very volatile anger, always finding fault out there. But when I began to look into my mind, it was clear that I had self-hate. Because you can't possibly have aversion for others, but have appreciation in a virtuous sense for yourself. They can't live together. So anger is for others, but it has to mean you've also got self-hate. You'd have to hate yourself. You'd have to. But it's painful and neurotic, and then there's aggression, and also anger goes along with pride. Like when you insult me, when I get angry with you, I also say, how dare you do that to me? That's arrogance. But it's so injured. And you get a person who's got a lot of pride, that's kind of, as soon as you insult that part of that person, they become like weak and pathetic, So we can see they're so linked to each other. I'm just talking.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So self-hate is just aversion turned in. Whereas for me in my life, it took me a long time. No, I did see I had self-hate. Just recently, a friend from when we were kids wrote to us, found me on the internet, and so wrote, and we knew them when they were children. And then my sister Julie was trying to find a photo of all of us together, and they found a photo when I was about 14. And I remember at that time, I was completely obsessed in love with James Dean, the actor. I went to all his films. I cut my hair for the first time to look like Jimmy Dean. I'd take my glasses off, so I thought I was ugly with my glasses, and this is the point I'm getting to. And I called myself Judy, who's the name of Natalie Wood, his girlfriend in Rebel Without a Cause. I was completely obsessed with Jimmy Dean, wanting to be Jimmy Dean and his girlfriend. It was like completely... So then I was 14, long-sighted. And when it used to be old-fashioned glasses, they were so thick, you know, my eyes were like saucers. And I hated myself in glasses. So my sister Julie found this photo, and I scratched my face out completely, like vicious self-hate. When you think you're revolting when you're young. It's just natural, you know. Almost like that, it depends. But I had a lot of anger, equally for other people, but just as much for myself, you know. But also arrogance. You can see arrogance. I thought I was, you know, and then of course as soon as you're arrogant and you find somebody who's better than you, it shows that there's low self-esteem. Because the key point about all the delusions, which is so fascinating, the key point in Buddhist psychology about all the neuroses, apart from their disturbingness, which is clear, is the delusion aspect. And one crucial way that they're all deluded, as I said about attachment to the chocolate cake, is they exaggerate the truth. So the more anger you've got, the more ugly that person looks, isn't it? And the more attachment you've got, the more divine the person looks. And we go between these all the time. So arrogance is overinflated, so important. And then low self-esteem, when you puncture that person, they go crashing down to the other extreme. The mind goes up and down between these. So they over-exaggerate something. So depression is internalized aversion, built up to the point of complete despair. And then what happens? You kill yourself. Because it's a nihilistic view, you know. All the delusions exaggerate. And that's why throughout the day, what we're trying to do is sort of keep the mind steady, not extreme, you know. Our mothers, in English we have a saying, anger makes a mountain out of a molehill. You have that in Swedish? A molehill, a mole, you know, a little mole makes a little mountain like this big, and a mountain is this big. So it's a powerful statement. It's meaning delusions exaggerate things. When you're really angry about some small thing, and then you calm down, you're kind of embarrassed because you realise it's very small. Not everything's small, but it was small. You make it worse than it is.
A storm in a cup of tea.
Huh?
A storm in a cup of tea.
There you go, storm in a teacup. Precisely. That's exactly right. These wonderful sayings that our mummies have, which are so true, you know. So we can see all these things, but we've just we treat them at the level of myth, you know. There's no real teaching in it. Yeah?
I just wonder if you could give any suggestion what one can do when one feels this very, very clearly. This is arrogance. This hate I'm feeling.
That's right.
It's the big me.
That's right.
And for me it has happened the last 7 years, and it comes up and it disappears, and it's always the same person and situation that makes this hatred coming up, and I get very ashamed.
Of course. So anger, an example, giving one as anger, in a particular way it manifests in your life. You mean for other people, finding fault, criticizing other people. Yeah?
But I feel it's attachment to, so I also want to, for this person is hindering me, is stopping me from, like I see it, from seeing about a Lama that I would like to see.
Okay, not trying to be too personal, but now you're being personal, it's good to be clear what you're saying. So give us an example of this scenario, so just so we know, without being too personal, giving yourself away. We don't want to do that.
It's very personal.
Well then don't be personal if you don't want to, but give an example of something. Just tell us what you're saying.
An example is that I have a Lama that I appreciate very, very much. And I have a friend who is also appreciating him very much. And the last years I felt that she's putting me aside. She doesn't want me to
be close to the Lama. This is called jealousy, darling.
Yes.
Okay, jealousy is a function of anger.
Yeah.
And when you're jealous of somebody because you feel that they're threatening to take away something that you think is yours, and then jealousy is based on, I don't want that person to be happy with this, so then they feel threatened. So then it's called jealousy that you're experiencing. I understand. Or you think that person, okay, then it gets dangerous. You might be right about that person, they might be having jealousy, that might be correct. But then the real one is to look into your mind and whatever arises in your mind about that one that's triggering what's in you.
Yeah.
So it might be true. So there's a multitude of things to think about this. There's many approaches, you know. So one approach is karma. So here you have a connection with a Lama. And you have a friend who's also connected to that same Lama. So obviously you can deduce from past lives, you've had some disharmony with each other. You've had some disharmony, and that means you're learning, forget her learning, you're learning is, okay, as a result of my karma in the past, maybe putting myself first, maybe be jealous of this person, criticizing this person, now look at me experiencing the results. So then you have to regret whatever it is you must have done, you have to purify it and have compassion, you do your mantra to purify and you vow never to do again. And this is one of the most powerful practices. And this is also applying emptiness. Because one of the biggest mistakes that all the delusions make is believing that it's out there from its own side, having nothing to do with poor innocent me. That's how ego thinks, isn't it? That's the one. So the most powerful antidote to this is also applying emptiness, because one of the first logical reasons to prove emptiness, the first basis of dependent arising, is that this is arising as a result of causes and conditions, and that's called karma. And that means due to my past actions in relation to that particular person, because karma is very personal, due to my negative actions, I'm now experiencing the result of it coming back from this other person. So I created this. This is a very powerful way to stop seeing it out there, to know you caused it, and then you purify it, and it makes you feel more accountable and more brave because you're owning it as your mistake. And then don't be surprised when you really purify this every day, that one day it will all look different. Do you understand? Otherwise, it's she doing it to me, and it's not fair, because the fact is, terrible things are done to us by other people. There's no discussion about that. Look at the world, raping and killing and torturing. There's no question people do terrible things. But if we don't have an explanation, and this is so outrageous about Buddhism, Buddha gives this clear explanation that I caused it. And this is so intense. This is the most tasty way to apply the most fundamental teaching of the Dharma. So let's look into karma in more detail. We have to know the facts about it, the nuts and bolts of karma. Because this is also applying emptiness. So profound, you know. And then when we do this, we really can begin to grow up. And by purifying it, it changes out there. Because what appears out there is due to what I did. So if I purify it, it'll change. One day you'll see this person and you'll be best friends again. You'll be surprised. And you've got to purify. But all we want is the other person to change. We feel not fair, how dare you do this to me? That's how ego thinks. And look at the world. This is the way everybody thinks. It's all out there having nothing to do with me. And this is what inherent means. It's got nothing to do with me. Hey, I'm an innocent victim. Hey, I didn't ask to get born, not my fault. This is exactly how ego feels. And the view of karma completely counteracts that. It's so tasty. But often we don't hear enough teachings about karma, or we don't think about it enough. We just go, oh, karma. What's it mean? Oh, I don't know. You've got to know the details, you know? So let's look at karma, okay? So there's 4 ways, Buddha says.
Thank you, it's very helpful.
Okay, good. That our karma ripens in the present. And in other words, okay, Buddha's saying, get big picture, okay? Trillions of sentient beings, trillions of mind possessors, but necessarily go back to beginning this time. There can't be a first moment. If karma is true, karma is cause and effect, okay? The law of karma is cause and effect. But Buddha's expertise is cause and effect in relation to sentient beings' experiences. Not cause and effect in how to make cups and clocks. That's cause and effect too, but his expertise is the cause and effect of the mind, okay? So like I said before, here, the word intention is the best word for the word karma. The best word, the most tasty. Intention is I will. That's the beginning of the karmic process. If there's no I will, the body and the speech do something, there's not really karma there. You could argue this, you know? You could say, there's a mouse in my kitchen, I will kill the mouse. That's the beginning of the process of my body doing the killing, isn't it? It's got to come from the intention, like holding the cup. If there's no intention, I'll hold the cup. Believe me, your fingers will collapse. And I'll let go, you know? But my intention, then the motivation, of course, is usually anger. That's what makes it negative. And then I kill the mouse. That's a complete action of killing. Now, if, you know, what's your name?
Barbara,
Okay. Barbara. Let's say Barbara has a mouse in her kitchen, but she doesn't even see it. And her foot stands on it, and it dies. And she doesn't even know. There can't be karma that she created, because there's no intention. Intention is huge. For the Buddha, it's one of the always present mental factors, and it runs the entire universe. I will. The body and speech then are the servants, and they do the action that the I will wants, you know. And then depending on the motivation, it's either a negative or a positive action. It's not a complicated concept, but it's the way they break down you know, an action. So this is the process of karma, and this is the law, Buddha says, a natural law. No one invented it, no one created it, he's not speculating, he's observed it. This is the law that runs all sentient beings' lives every second. Therefore, all happiness and all suffering comes from this process. So, there are 4 ways our past intentional actions leave seeds in the mind, because every millisecond of your intentions will leave a seed in the mind, necessarily. Every millisecond of your intentions will program your mind, necessarily. It's just a natural law. It just happens, Buddha says. That's just the way it is. Every millisecond of every seed you plant, if you leave it in the mind, naturally will grow, get bigger and bigger, and then sometime in the future, let's say in this life, those seeds will ripen in 4 ways. Well, the first way is our own actual human rebirth, in our case. Well, you know, if we really understood how much virtue and morality practice, as Lama Zopa says, in the context of vows and morality, then we must have practiced in the past just to get our mind go zapping into our mummy's womb. It will completely blow our minds. At the time of our death, not more than even before we stop breathing, already the karmic seed from our bank vault of billions of karmic seeds would have been triggered. Let's assume we died peacefully. This triggered the main karmic seed from practicing morality in the context of the karmic vows and morality that would have ripened, that already programmed our consciousness, even before we stopped breathing in the past life, to go to that particular mother's womb. In my case, my mummy, Agnes Bliss, lying there with my daddy, Teddy Courtin, in about May 1944. Okay, I came out early. I came out in December, so I was in the womb for about 7 months. So I can deduce I was conceived around about May 1944. Well, there's my mummy and daddy in Melbourne, Australia. God knows where I came from. But we can deduce, even though I was not even dead yet in the past person, the karmic seed ripened and programmed me to go to that womb, already programmed. A few weeks beforehand. At the same time as that karmic seed that was programming to get me a human birth, and the cause of it is incredible morality, like I said, practice in the context of vows of morality, that would have also triggered the other 3 billions of other karmic seeds, which are the other 3 ways that karma ripens. And they're called, in this life, the experiences similar to the cause, which is starting with the parents you get, the siblings, your next door neighbours, your friends, how they treat you, how they see you. Since we are born, we have karma with people. We've got this strong history with sentient beings, haven't we? Mummies, daddies, siblings, aunties, uncles, rapists, kind people, good people, the nuns at school, the children, the ones who are mean to us, the one who are... You understand? Since we're born, isn't it? We're constantly meeting sentient beings. They are not random events. Every one has a strong history with them. Every single one. Karma's really personal, you know? There's no way a person who hasn't harmed you could ever possibly harm you. There is no way anybody could help you or be kind to you if you haven't been kind to them or helped them. We caused it. So this is called experiences similar to the cause. Whatever happens to us, even the rats that eat your house, they're your rats, baby. Every sentient being, how they treat us. What is the cause? Due to my past actions. So if someone's mean to you, I must have been mean to that person. It's like hardly rocket science. If a person gives you money, I must have been generous. If a person believes your words, even if you're lying, that's because you told the truth in the past. If a person doesn't believe your words, even if you're speaking the truth, it's because of lying in the past. If no matter how hard you work, you can't get a job, it's because of lack of generosity and of stealing in the past. Even if you're stealing every day, but you've got generosity karma from the past, you'll get jobs and money will fall out of the sky for you. Everything that happens to us in relation to others, this is called experiences similar to the cause. Just look at the experience and you know you've done that one. It's just not complicated. Just we don't think like this because we think I'm a victim. How dare that happen to me? I don't deserve it. This is the view of samsara, isn't it? We all believe it. Buddha says, not true, baby. Then the next one is your tendencies. This is called actions similar to the cause. Your personality, your tendencies, your characteristics, your goodness, your badness, your psychopathic tendencies, your rape tendencies, your being good at football tendencies, whatever your personality traits are, you did not get those from your parents. You were programmed with those from the first second of conception, and they already ripened even before you died in the past life. Then the 4th one is called environmental karma. The very way the physical world will impact upon you. You're born in a disgusting, dirty country. You're born in an ugly country. You're born in a country where there's war. You're born in a beautiful country. You're born in a polluted country. You have an ugly house in a lovely suburb. Whatever it might be, you're environmental. So every way the physical world impacts upon you, all the way all the sentient beings see you and treat you, all of your own tendencies and even your own humanity. Main cause, my past actions. It's not complicated. It's just we don't think like this. This is Buddha's teaching. So the experiential implication of this is every millisecond of everything that arises in your mind, in your life, you are the boss of it. This is how you counteract the ego, because ego thinks I'm an innocent victim. Lama Yeshe's phrase for ego is so tasty. The self-pity me. It's completely a lie. It's the lie of ego grasping. And we believe in that lie every day. And until we hear Buddha's teachings about karma, why would we change our mind? Because ego has got this particular interpretation. I'm an innocent victim. I don't deserve it. That's how we feel all the time. Look at us. So we've got to learn these words to counteract them. We've got to argue with them. We've got wrong assessments, And if we don't hear the teachings about karma, how will we know how to think? Do you understand? And this is the basis of practice of any decent Buddhist. We love to hear the stories about the Dalai Lama, Just look at the Dalai Lama. First of all, if you've never heard of his life and you see this fellow, he's a happy fellow. He's cracking jokes, he's funny, he's healthy, he's strong, 80 years old, he's an amazing guy, right? Then you start to hear his story. 60 years of suffering, all these people destroyed. You'd think he ought to be out of his brain with misery, right? But we go, oh, that's just the Dalai Lama. He must watch his breath or something, God. It's because he's got this view. And he's, of course, perfected it. That's why he can be a happy man in the face of nightmare. We see it every day, but we don't put it together, Oh, that's just the Dalai Lama will think. Meanwhile, I'm allowed to feel sorry for myself. You understand? We've got to learn the words, We've got to learn Buddha's teachings of karma. It's in there, in the text, in the literature for centuries. Detailed, unbelievable, detailed, intricate teachings on what Buddha thinks. Many Buddhists never hear about karma. Oh, it's not important. I want to watch my breath. Bloody hell. Are we communicating here, Barbara?
I'm very happy to have heard this. I have always had a little difficulty with karma, but now it has opened up.
Good, darling. Of course we have difficulty, but this is because we're not used to thinking it, and then we block it, We've got to take it as our working hypothesis. If we say we're Buddhist, when you said I have a Lama, well, if you have a Lama baby, he knows this stuff. So start picking his brains and learning it. And we have resistance to it because we don't like it, that's all. We don't like it because we don't want to be responsible. We'd rather blame somebody, Barbara. That's how ego is. Ego is in its nature a victim, And so that's why we resist these words. And that's why for me, I never say, oh, I believe in this stuff. I never use that word. I say it's my working hypothesis, which is true. Because until I can prove Buddha wrong, I'm happy to think this. And I'm working with it, trying to internalize it and verify it and experience it every day, which is the point. And apply it. Not easy.
It's worth it.
That's right, darling. Precisely. Any more questions? The fact is, too, this one, let's look at dependent arising again, okay? There's 3 levels. There's millions of ways in which things exist in dependence upon various factors, which is the general idea of the meaning of dependent arising. But presented more clearly, you can say there are 3 levels of dependent arising. And the first one is cause and effect. That there's, you start to analyze a cup. So cup is nothing other than all the countless causes and condition is just a word for secondary cause. The cup is nothing other than the countless causes and conditions that go back and back and back. Cup is the culmination of countless causes and conditions, isn't it? Therefore, you would say, using this as the argument, there is no cup from its own side, because cup is nothing other than all the causes and conditions. Well, causes and conditions for the object called self is, of course, karma. It's what it means.
There was the response.
What?
Thank you. That was my question before. Thank you.
That helped.
Yeah, now the answer came.
What?
Yeah,
I'm very happy. Good, I know it. Okay, good. So then, karma is such a tasty, this is what I've just been saying here. All we did in that discussion was look at all the causes. Let's just say someone harming you, someone being mean to you. The causes and conditions, the causes have, if I take it from me, if it's happening to me, then I must have caused it, is a simple logic to say. So therefore I have to look at what the action is that's happening to me, and I know that I must have done that action to that person, roughly speaking. It's more nuanced than that, but broadly speaking, you know. So in other words, if a person's really loving to you and generous to you, we forget when it comes to the good things, by the way. We never ask, why do good things happen to me? We don't care why good things happen. Just give me more, please. But if we think of it this way, it's very profound. It makes us really realise we must have practiced morality in the past, and because we know we like good things, keep practicing morality, please. Pretty basic. So the whole of our life is the fruit of our own actions. So when we analyse it this way, it forces us to be in the centre of responsibility for what happens to me, rather than this feeling of being an innocent victim who doesn't deserve it, which is how ego thinks. So it's so profound to help us break down ego, to help us rather realise emptiness, dependent arising of causes and conditions. To think about karma, I find really so tasty, because it's so painful, isn't it, when this thing happens. You feel so hopeless, you wish they'd change, you feel it's not fair, you build it up in the mind. But if we just force ourselves to think this one, it puts us in responsibility. It makes us accountable. It makes us grown up. Okay, I caused it, so shut up, Barbara. And then regret having done it. This is the purification practice. Lama Zopa says, we are insane not to do the 4 opponent powers, the purification practice, you know, every single day. We are insane. So that means regretting what you did in the past. Why do you regret? Because you're sick of suffering. Right? Second, you have compassion. Third, you do the practice to purify. And fourth, you vow not to do it again. This is how everything changes. And it makes us courageous. It makes us brave. It makes us accountable. It makes us grown up. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So tasty.
So grateful.
Yeah.
I'm eager to start.
I understand, John. So in this, hang on a second, Nadia. In here too, there's not enough things, but if I can send a PDF to you with a lot of I like to talk about the purification practice and how karma ripens. So I can send a PDF to Katya and you can get it, and we've got more details about that, and much more details about emptiness, like I've been talking. All of this so we can send a PDF if you want. If anybody would like it, you ask Katya.
Yes.
Okay, good. What, Nadia? Yes, Simon?
No, I mean, when you talk, it sounds very good. That's very good. Yeah.
I understand.
But in reality, I mean, you say purification practice that you regret you've done something.
Yes.
But what you say is that I have to regret that I have done something that I am not sure that I have done.
Well, you can deduce it logically.
Yeah.
Okay, let me tell you. Okay.
I'll
I'll explain. We're taking this as our hypothesis, okay? We're taking it as a scientific explanation of why things happen. This is what we're talking here. All right. So now, let's say you've never heard of botany. The law of botany. Botany, tell them.
Botany.
Botany.
Let's say you've never heard of it.
Okay.
You've never heard of it. And you have a big piece of garden in your backyard, and you're always throwing things in the backyard. You don't know that there's seeds that will ripen as terrible, terrible poison plants. Let's say you don't know that. You with me? It's possible, isn't it?
Yeah.
And these ugly big things grow, and you keep thinking, why is this happening? God must be punishing me. The next door neighbour's doing it. It's not fair. I don't deserve it. You're kind of with me. And then you learn the law of botany. So you don't remember throwing those things in there. You've been living there for 50 years. You don't remember even that you did it. But if it's in your garden, you know you must have done it. That's the logic. So they say with karma, if you get the fruit, you must have sown the seed, baby. Because it's your garden, not mine. And if you sow the seed, you will get the result. This is fundamental law of botany, and it's the fundamental law of karma. So we can deduce that when bad things happen, you've done bad things. And we can deduce if good things happen, you've done good things. So I think it's really helpful to remember the good things, but we agonize, why do bad things happen to me? We never agonize, why do good things happen to me? Because we don't care why, just give me more good, because ego thinks I deserve it, but ego does not think I deserve bad. But it's like saying, I deserve flowers, but I don't deserve weeds. Excuse me, if they're in your garden, you did them both. It's a really helpful way to think. So you can deduce it using this as our theory here, okay? We haven't got clairvoyance yet. We can't prove it. But this is the theory we're using. So if any bad things happen, or good things, you learn to own them. And you know it. Excuse me. Oh, yuck. You know you want the good things. You want the good things. This is like first level of practice. This is not even looking at your mind yet. This is junior school level. Okay, forget emptiness, forget compassion. This is the very first level of applying Lord Buddha's fundamental law of karma, cause and effect. And this is Buddha's point. There's no creator doing it. It's not accidental. It's not random. This is a natural law that literally covers every sentient being all the time. So like you know, if there's a law of botany, it's not as if some plants have a seed and others just accidental. We know that's insane. Once you establish the law, we know this in science. Once you establish the law of numbers, the law of engineering, the law of architecture, the law of music, it applies every time and is consistent every time. You see what I'm saying? So karma is the same. For the Buddha, this is a natural law. He didn't make it up. He has observed it. He's observed it to be true, you know. So don't just believe it, take it as your hypothesis, but you have to apply it every day because it's the explanation for why good things happen to me, why bad things happen to me, why I get sick, why I'm old, why I'm fat, why good this. It's an explanation for everything. It's Buddha's view, you know. The usual view is God did it, and nobody knows why, so you have faith. I'm not complaining, but that's the view, nothing wrong. The other view is the materialist view, and as we all say, we haven't got the answers yet. Do you understand? This is Buddha's view, which most people don't even know about. Even most Buddhists don't know about it. They don't study it, you know. So for me, when I first heard the Buddha's teachings from the Tibetan Lamas, this was the piece that just blew my mind. This was the piece that I couldn't describe, helped me so much, it still does. It's huge, because we always have the question, why? Everybody in the universe, I find it, everywhere I go, people always ask, why? Well, Buddha's got an answer. I'm happy that someone's brave enough to have a decent answer. You know, I mean, I did a conference in Miami a long time ago, and the topic was why do bad things happen to good people? It could easily have been. It might as well have been, why do good things happen to bad people? But no one ever asked that question. So there was a Lutheran, a Catholic, me, and a rabbi. What was really fascinating, first of all, the Lutheran and the Catholic, I didn't understand their answers at all. And I think the real answer is it's God's will, but most people are scared to say that because it sounds like too terrible. But it's kind of intense. I think it's amazing. I think it's a pure view. It's an amazing view if you're brave enough, if you believe in a creator, you know. So the other one, when I gave the talk of karma, which is this talk here, explaining why things happen, and then the rabbi, who was from Israel, he clapped. He laughed and he said, we have the same view. He was a Kabbalah rabbi. They have the view of karma and reincarnation. Well, all the Jews in the audience couldn't believe it. They'd never heard this before. They were shocked, you know. This rabbi was cracking jokes about Hitler. I mean, Jews don't crack jokes about Hitler, do they? But he did. It was really wonderful. He said, we have a saying that every time something bad happens, you think, fantastic, one less debt to repay. It's a really wonderful view, you know. So it was very easy to hear that. I thought it was very nice. But the fact is, most religions is God, and it's not our job to interfere with God's view. You should accept, nothing wrong with that. But the West, we have no idea why. And Buddha says we'll never discover the answer if you only look at the physical, you know, because he says we're missing the point of the mind. And Buddha's expertise is this one. But even most Buddhists don't think about this, even think it's not important. But it's the fundamentals of Buddha's view of the universe. It's completely in all the stuff, in the text for centuries, you know. Very interesting, really. And I find hugely helpful because we all ask why. And, you know, it's just, for me, it's just unbelievably helpful. For me, this is the basis of your Buddhist practice. And when I look at Tibetans who really are practicing, you know, two examples that show my point. There's, in 2003, Richard Gere, as you know, is a Buddhist, invited Dalai Lama to come to New York, and he also invited about 20 former prisoners, all of whom had done some kind of meditation in prison. And he and I were discussing about collaborating on prison work, because for 14 years I ran this thing called Liberation. I was living in the States, and I was editing the Buddhist magazine of the FPMT, my Lama's organisation, the magazine called Mandala. I was editor, and I got a letter from this young Mexican fellow who was 18, who told me he was in this top security prison in California, and he'd read a book of Lama Yeshe in his cell, 23 hours a day, really terrible conditions in these prisons. So he was very moved by the talk of compassion, so I wrote to him, and within a year I had 40 people writing, you know. So this project developed over 14 years. I ran it. We had thousands of prisoners writing. I had many couple of hundred mentors around the world writing to prisoners. I was visiting prisoners, taking on their phone calls, so on and so forth. And this film that my nephew made, he visited prisons with me, and a lot of the film was, you know, in the prison with these guys on death row and everything. It's very moving. Anyway, Richard Gere invited these prisoners, 20 of them, ex-prisoners, to have an all-day talk about their experiences in prison and to meet the Dalai Lama. And he also invited a couple of people like me who'd been working with people in prison. And it was a very moving day, you know. These Americans, like black, white, Puerto Rican, Mexican, male, female, a whole cross-section of Americans. And it was a very moving day. And so they also invited 2 young Tibetan nuns, you know. And these young women, very young nuns, had been in prison and tortured for a couple of years and sexually abused. So these young women talking about their experiences, I think the first thing was probably evident to everybody was their suffering was worse than everybody else's, if you can quantify suffering. But the other point that was very interesting, I think, was that all the Americans with the typical materialist view of suffering and racism and sexism and anger and resentful and not fair and victim, which is typical, they were very surprised that these young women weren't angry. And that for us in the West, we almost think they're suppressing, you know, because we think anger is a good and natural response to being harmed. But actually, like we've been talking, anger is the response of an innocent victim. It's natural. You think about it, philosophically. If you really do believe you began in your mother's womb, which we all do, as materialists. I mean, no one told us this, but we just believe. I mean, sorry, we didn't know this, but people told us. This is told the scientific view, so we believe it, right? And all we believe that God put us there. So if you've got the typical materialist view, then you just assume I began in my mother's womb. The second thing I assume is that mummy and daddy literally created me. So they are the ones who gave me anger, who gave me jealousy, who gave me love, who gave me kindness. This is the materialist view, is it not? It's a philosophical viewpoint. And we really believe it as a truth. No one doubts it. And we feel it in our bones. It fits the view of ego, that I'm an innocent victim. So it's true, if you got sent to prison because you're a little Buddhist, you don't even hurt a fly, you know, and you're raped and abused, then it would be correct to be angry, wouldn't it? Because you didn't ask to get born, you don't deserve it, you didn't do anything wrong. So anger would be a valid response. If you think about it, how dare you do that to me, I don't deserve it. You accept my point? And that's how we all believe. And that's the view we all have in the West. So if you don't get angry, you must be suppressing it, because anger is said to be good. Now, if you have the Buddhist view, that you ran to your mother's womb, you brought your own tendencies with you, you only meet people that you've met before, they only do things to you that you've done to them before, which is the law of karma, then you don't say you're angry. Why would you? Because you know you caused it. It's not a big deal. You know it, so therefore you wouldn't be angry. It's logical. But I can say, like I said, I had huge anger in my life. But now I am here these years, more than half my life, trying to live according to this stuff I'm talking here. You know, I've got enthusiasm for this path. This is my working hypothesis. I found the karmic teaching so powerful. I try to apply really sincerely. And I can say, I don't have much high realizations, but I can say, any high realizations, but I can say with certainty, my application of the view of karma as my interpretation of me and my life and why things happen, this is what has helped me give up anger and jealousy to some extent, you know? Because jealousy, anger, attachment are the viewpoints of the philosophy of the innocent victim. Can you hear my point? So this is huge if you live it. It's not easy. Oh my God. So these young women, then they even said, at the end, there were tears, you know, and they said, and of course, we had compassion for our torturers because we knew we must have harmed them in the past. That for them is real, you know, and therefore the basis of compassion, because you take responsibility. I mean, it's intense. Equally, a friend of mine, a Tibetan monk, he said he was, you know, in 87, the first kind of mini uprising against the Chinese communists since 59, really. And it was all the young monks and nuns, all the radicalized monks and nuns, you know. So they were the ones who demonstrated. Then they got, you know, arrested, tortured, killed. Many escaped, and it has been, and of course, escaping since. So this friend of mine, Jigdol, a monk, he said it was very funny. He said that his parents decided they'd make many Tibetans, so they had 13 babies or something, you know. So he became a monk when he was 13, and in 87 he was demonstrating. And so then he got arrested, got tortured, then he got released, and then he got, you know, he demonstrated again. His friend had his head blown off, and then he thought he'd better escape, so he got to Nepal. Then because he was on all the lists, his father got murdered, brother got murdered. So in other words, a lot of suffering. I remember I said to him, do you ever get angry? And he laughed. He said, angry, what for? It's our own fault. Now those words are too shocking for us. But all he meant was it's karma. Because for them it's such a real philosophy. You know, with us completely brainwashed with our other view, and occasionally we hear people talk about karma, but like you said, we don't like it. We don't want to go there. It upsets ego's picture. We don't go into it deep enough. We're not brave enough to really analyse it and think it through and try to apply it. We just leave it on the outskirts, you know? Do you understand, isn't it, Barbara? And then when we do read it, it seems too cosmic. And Tibetans sound like fundamentalists when they talk. I mean, they sound like the worst fundamentalists, you know? Do you understand what I mean? So we've got to put, this is why for me it's so important to put it into our modern terms. Speak about psychologically, as a hypothesis, which is what I try to do. Then you can get your head around it, you know? It's a real, it's Buddha's view. It's in all the teachings since beginningless time, for God's sake, in Buddha's teachings. Because you've got to analyse, you either are made by a creator, or mummy and daddy make you. The only other option is it's random, and that's completely insane. Might as well die now, it's random. But karma's the other option. Karma's a natural law. Karma, hear the words please, it's a natural law. That means with karma, there is no boss, there is no creator, therefore there is no punisher, and there is no rewarder. But we are used to thinking morality is punishment and reward, which means that someone up there is pulling the strings. That's how we think, but we don't analyse it. But karma is you're the boss. I mean, I love that view. So if I'm the boss, I can change. That means I've got to own the good stuff as well as the bad, you know? We've got to be brave. Come on. Cool. Anyway, this is my view, okay? I love the teachings of karma. There's enough of them. Do you understand? And that's what Buddha's saying. We are the boss. We are the boss. But deep in the bones of our being, ego wants there to be someone up there. And then we can either love them, and if they don't do what we want, we can blame them. It's very scary, actually. I'm telling you. Most people don't blame God. Apparently Italians blame God. Tell me they have the rudest words for God when something goes wrong. But an Argentinian fellow I met, he said, oh, we're even worse than the Italians. I don't know, Swedes blame God when things go wrong. Do you have rude, bad words for God? I didn't. We came from an Irish Catholic. We never dare blame God, you know? Anyway, are we communicating here? And the fact is, karma is dependent arising. Causes and conditions is the first level dependent arising. Yes.
But then they can karma rebirth goes
What,
completely. Karma and rebirth
Yes.
goes completely together.
Totally, utterly.
Totally.
Your mind is beginningless. You never began.
And then this with rebirth, there was already
What, darling?
rebirth. It doesn't come from Buddha. It comes
From itself.
before Buddha.
Your consciousness is beginningless.
No, but I mean the concept.
Of course, Buddha
reincarnation.
didn't make any. Hey, listen. Buddha did not make up any of this. This is, Buddha says this is how reality is, and he simply observed it.
Yes.
Other people have observed it too, so what?
No, but I wanted to say something else.
Well, I'm about answering that point first. So continue, Dar. I don't
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
Continue.
No, I wanted to say that
Yeah.
this concept or this thing that we call reincarnation,
Yeah.
there was already before Buddha.
I'm agreeing with you. I just said he didn't make it up. I know that.
Okay.
I know that's what I said, darling.
Yeah.
That's my point. Buddha, everything that we are saying that Buddhism is what he has observed. He doesn't own any of this. He's observed it. Of course it was existing since beginning, it's been existing since beginningless time.
But what he observed, was it the same like the Hindus? Or
No, he has different,
He
he
said
has
something
different
new.
interpretations. Christians talk about reincarnation, but they call it only, you know, human, purgatory, hell or heaven. They only have 3 little pieces. That's reincarnation. It's similar. So that for me, what I've observed, I would put it this way, Nadia. If I listen to different views, like the Christians, the Hindus, the Muslims, the Buddhists, there's a lot of common findings. A lot of things they've seen that are similar, wouldn't you agree? But the difference is the interpretation. And that's where the radical differences are. So even the Hindus talk about a source. So they're more like creator. That's where the fundamental difference. Whereas Buddha says you don't need that. Each individual consciousness goes back since beginningless time, every millisecond creating its own experiences. Every millisecond, every sentient being is experiencing the fruit of their own past actions. And that's why it doesn't ever go. Whereas the Hindus still go to the source, which is like God. Because they still have a reification process, you know. And that's where Buddha differs most radically.
So
And
we don't have a source. we don't have.
No, there's no one. That's precisely right. Precisely. That's why, you know, you look at the Catholics, Christians, they talk about hell. Muslims talk about hell. Jews talk about hell. Hindus talk about. Buddha talks about. But it's their interpretation of it that's the radical difference. You know, as Lama Yeshe said, hell is not some place where the devil is waiting, saying, "Ha ha, I'm waiting for Lama Yeshe," where you're sent by somebody and punished that lasts forever. That's the Christian interpretation. Buddhism is fundamentally different. As Lama Yeshe said, hell is the manifestation in the mind of that being of its own experience due to its own past action. We literally are the creators. Whereas we think of it as a dualistic thing, heaven and hell are places created by God, and he's the punisher and the rewarder, and he sends you there. That's the typical view of existing outside from its own side. That's the view we all have. Buddha says it's far more subtle than that. It's experiential, that we all create our own experiences. So hell is a real experience, not just in a human body. It's a real mental experience with a certain level of physicality, literally created by that being. Every realm is like that. They're actual psychological experiences created by those sentient beings. We don't need punishment or reward. It's irrelevant. You know? But you look at the materialist view, it's very similar. When I was in my mother's household as a child, Mummy was the boss. So Mummy said, do that. And if I didn't do it, I was in trouble. Because that's the typical view. And this is where, okay, very interesting topic here. We're okay? Okay. This whole, you know, the analysis of what morality is, we really should look at it in more depth, you know. Because I think we have a vague idea of it, which is a dualistic view, which is a sort of morality somehow is something up there from somebody, either mummy or judge or daddy or God or police or government. There's always something out there that imposes upon me, don't do this and don't do that. So that we assume the dualistic view of punishment and reward. So that's why when we do something good, we want mummy to see. We want praise. We want to be rewarded. But if we do something naughty, we don't want mummy to see, do we? We want to get away with it. Are you see my point? It's very profound. That's our view of morality. It's this dualistic nonsense. That's the same as the Christian or the Muslim one. I'm not criticizing it, we're just looking at it. It's a philosophical position. The Buddha's is, you know, the Buddha's is, whatever you do, just naturally brings its own result. You don't need a person out there pulling the strings. You don't need a person watching and punishing and rewarding. My mother used to say, virtue has its own rewards. That's what Buddha's saying. That virtue is the cause of my happiness. And non-virtue is the cause of my suffering. It's a completely integrated, it's a natural law. It's such an amazing view. It's so tasty. It's completely non-dualistic. It's rooted in emptiness. Do you see what I'm saying? So this is why the Buddhist view of morality is very fascinating. This is grade 1 junior school. Buddha's first instructions to us, as you know, is the 10 non-virtues. These are a checklist of 10 don'ts. Don't kill, don't lie. 3 of the body. Don't kill, don't lie, don't kill, don't steal, and don't jump on the wrong partner. You know, simple as like that. The next 4 are speech. Obviously for us humans. Don't lie. Don't just rabbit on about nothing. Blah, blah, vomit. Don't use harsh speech. And don't talk bad things behind backs. These are the things that destroy so many people's relationships. Look at the suffering, is unbelievable. So these 7 little things of the body and the speech. And the last 3 are just, in my way of saying it, are just the beginnings of Buddha's getting us to look at our mind. Calming down the craving, which is a gross level of attachment, calming down the ill will, which is like malice, which is wanting the person to suffer, which is a gross level of anger, and calming down the really narrow-minded fundamentalist ignorance, which is the gross level of the ego grasping, you know? The 3 delusions, the root delusions, these 10. Buddha uses these basic guidelines for somebody who wants to begin to become a decent person. So now, why would Buddha say, don't kill? Now, if I'm a Catholic, the why is because God said so. Like I said, my Jesuit friend told me, a sin by definition is doing what God said not to do. And that's the same as my mother. Don't do that. And I'll say, why not? Because I say so. That's the view we have in the world, isn't it? It's wrong because the police said it was wrong. It's wrong because God said it's wrong. That's the view we have of morality. So that's why we have instinctive not liking morality. kind of we think, well, who do you think you are telling me what to do? You know? We think it's something imposed by somebody else. It's very childish. Buddha says the natural law. So, okay, his first point. He says a negative action, sin, has got nothing to do with the fact that he says it. God Almighty. He's a messenger, you know. But he has found, by doing some market research, he says, do some market research in this room, do a survey. Do you like being killed? We all know the answer. Do you like being stolen from? Guess what? We'll have equal agreement, won't we? No one likes being killed, lied to, stolen from. Ask the dogs and the giraffes and you'll see they're the same. Well, he says, guess what? That proves killing is wrong because it hurts people. Pretty basic. It's not truth. It's not moralistic in the bloody sky. Excuse me, I'm being Australian again. It's a natural thing. It's convention. People don't like being killed, punched, lied to, cheated on. It's pretty straightforward. It hurts people. That's what makes it a negative action. So, but listen to this. Why he exhorts us not to do it, first, is not because it hurts others. Guess what? It's because it hurts me. And we have to look at that. So why does it hurt me? And this takes time. Because we think of morality as what someone else, doing what someone else says. But no, Buddha, it's a bit like if you go to your doctor, she will tell you not to smoke because you might get cancer. Now you don't go, who do you think you are telling me what to do? You don't say that. You're so grateful this kind doctor has pointed out that you might have a tendency for cancer, so they give some advice. You're grateful for this advice. You don't hear it as moralistic, do you? Well, that's how we should hear Buddha. But, and they're equally, like you don't go home and then think, oh, the doctor doesn't see me, so I'll smoke, I won't get cancer. We do not think that, do we? But that's our view of morality. It's really childish in Buddha's views. It's very childish. You see what I'm saying? But the Buddha's view, it's a natural thing. Now let's look at, analyse why, when I kill, why do I create negative karma? It's not because it hurts others. There's two things. And again, in these notes, I'll send a PDF to Kate, to Katya. It's in there too, a breakdown of the 10 non-virtues and why, and what makes them negative. It's very, and again, it's the same kind of analysis we're doing here with the actions, with Nadia's action and with Osa's action. You analyse. So let's analyse morality, okay? So, an action of killing, the mouse scenario. So in order for an action of killing, and this goes for every single action, virtuous and non-virtuous, in order for it to be what they call a complete action, which is one that will sow a seed that if I keep it in my mind will grow and grow and eventually ripen as a type of rebirth, to bring the complete result of a type of rebirth. So an action called killing, as a negative action, if it stays in the mind, will eventually ripen as many, many, many lower realm rebirths, because one seed brings many fruits. Equally, a virtuous action, a complete action, and I'm going to describe, left in the mind, will eventually ripen and bring many, many, many positive rebirths. For Buddha, this is a natural law. Okay, let's analyse. Okay, so in order for this action of killing a mouse in my kitchen to be a complete action, there have to be 4 things in place. The object, a living mouse, pretty clear. Can't be a toy mouse. A living mouse. The second one is called intention, but it's got A, B, and C. So A is you've got to recognise there's the mouse. That mouse. Recognition is the mouse. Second is the crucial one. It's called intention, which means the thought, I will kill that mouse. The thought, I will kill that mouse. The third one, and the crucial one, which is the peace, the dependent arising, the peace that determines whether or not, when I kill the mouse, it is a positive action or a negative action. In other words, it's not the mere intention to kill a mouse that makes it negative when I do it. It's the motivation behind it. Now let's look at the world, and we can deduce pretty quickly, I would think, that the main reason, then you've got attachment for those who do hunting and fishing. It's called attachment. They're not angry with the fish. They love fish. Do you see what I'm saying? So the main reason or motivation that impels most killing is rage, anger, isn't it? Distress, gone crazy, can't stand, hate, wars, terrorists. Do you understand my point? So clearly you can see it's the most damaging, the most harmful. Anger is the most intense delusion. You can see it. So that aversion, in the case of a mouse, I clearly don't loathe it completely, but I don't like mouse. How disgusting, a mouse in my kitchen, isn't it? Aversion, disgust. That's the reason. So then the motivation is there. The third one is you do the action. And the fourth is the mouse dies before me. That's a complete action of killing. And if I leave that in my mind, and it will go bigger and bigger, and it will ripen as many lower realm rebirths. Okay, now, let's analyze it. See, an action of killing is also a dependent arising. It's this action, like we described, any action or any phenomenon, a clock, a cup, or an action is made of many parts, isn't it? I am holding a cup. We start to analyse. It's made of many bits and pieces, isn't it? The thumb with this or that, the mind doing it, the mind intention holding. It's all made up of parts. The fundamental thing of dependent arising is made of parts. This is the second, more advanced one, as opposed to causes. The parts. So an action of killing has many parts. We just broke them down. There's the object. There's the intention. There's the motivation. There's the recognition. There's the action. There's the result. There's just a few parts, right? That makes up a typical action called killing that is a negative action. Can you hear me? Now let's look at the difference. That's proving dependent arising. And this is very much the Mahayana view now. Let's say Nicholas has a mouse in his kitchen. Okay? There is a mouse. Second, intention, 3 parts. He sees that mouse. Second, I will kill the mouse. Third, his motivation. Listen to this one. He sees the mouse is suffering, and he's got such compassion. Poor mouse. I can't believe the poor mouse. And he believes, like a lot of people, if you kill it, you'll stop its suffering, right? This is called euthanasia. We do it to our grandmas as well. You with me, people?
Yeah.
The object is there, a living grandma or living mouse. The intention, and then underneath that is the recognition. It's that grandma, not the other grandma. The intention to do it, I will kill grandma. The third is your motivation, incredible compassion, because you really believe you'll want to stop grandma's suffering. It's possible, isn't it? So look at the difference already. My mind is imbued with aversion and disgust and wishing to harm the mouse. His mind is imbued with compassion and he wants to help the mouse. That's the point that's different. You don't have to look on the outside, you might not tell the difference. But look at the difference. That's the one that makes all the difference. So then the mouse is there and he kills it. You could argue that his action, he creates virtue. He doesn't create negativity. How can he? How can he? He wanted to help the mouse. Oh, he's stupid. It's not, Dalai Lama says compassion is not enough, you need wisdom. He lacks wisdom. Because the fact is, he doesn't have the clairvoyance to see the mouse's mind. And maybe the poor mouse is so freaked out anyway, his poor little ego's gone crazy. And if you die when ego is rising, that'll trigger a negative seed, and the poor little mouse will take a worse rebirth. So he didn't just not help the mouse, he threw it from the frying pan into the fire. But nevertheless, because he really meant well, his compassion was so huge. Are you hearing me, people? He created virtue. He didn't help the mouse, he made it worse even. But this is the Mahayana one. The power of the motivation is so intense. That doesn't mean you'll go around killing with a good motivation. Please back off. Don't kill anybody. But it's just showing the point. You take one piece in that dependent arising of killing a mouse, one piece, especially the motivation, that changes the whole action. This proves it's empty. It proves it's a dependent arising. It proves that killing is not inherently bad. But don't think that doesn't mean it's not bad. Don't mistake the meaning. Don't mistake the meaning. Are we communicating here? Yeah. Let's say Katya has a mouse. And like I mentioned before, she doesn't even see the mouse. Her foot stands on it and the mouse dies. But she doesn't even see it and she never knew. Well, you could say because there is the mouse, okay, there is the object there, there is a mouse, but there's no recognition. There's no intention, therefore no motivation, there can't be. The mouse is there and the foot does the action. There is no karma. Strictly speaking, everything in life is more nuanced and more subtle and more sophisticated and more difficult. But this is analysing each thing simply. So we've got to be really clear how we're talking. And this is the Buddha's point about morality. So then as far as the mice are concerned, they don't care. There's 3 dead mice, okay? They've got their own karma, you understand? You understand? And you could even argue, this is an interesting point, you could even argue, let's say my mouse. Let's say I'm really sadistic. And I hate mice, and I'd kill it slowly, which is a million times more heavy karma for me. Do you understand? But let's say the mouse, I've got a Buddhist neighbour, Katya's there, and Katya's got some mantras on. And my mouse, all they can hear when they're dying in agony is the mantras. Well, that could bless their mind so powerfully that when it dies, it can take a human rebirth and meet the Buddhas. Well, lucky mouse, but heavy karma for me, I'm sorry. His mouse, who he really wants to help, might have the most intense ego grasping, and he can send it to the hell realms. Do you see what I'm trying to say? So what we do has very little to do with the mouse. The mouse has got its own karma, you know. That's why you can't, the Buddha often says, you can't begin to help sentient beings until you have clairvoyance. You've got to see their minds. Then you know how to help them perfectly. Yeah?
I wonder about Katja's mouse.
What about it?
What about Katja's mouse?
What about
that she, you said there is no karma there.
Basically saying you could argue because there was no intention
Yeah. But I'm
and
thinking,
no
wasn't she
motivation. Just a minute.
careless? Yeah.
Excuse me, just let me finish. There's no intention, there's no awareness as a mouse, there's no intention to kill, and there's no motivation. So there's no intention, which is the meaning of karma.
Yeah.
Therefore, if intention means karma, there can't be karma. So can you hear that?
Yeah, I can.
Good. So now what's your question?
Yeah. So, and then, couldn't one say that she was careless?
That's another discussion. I didn't say she was careless. I wasn't careless. That's not the discussion here. We're talking about what's in her mind. I didn't say she wasn't careless. I didn't say she wasn't careless. That's not the discussion here. That's not the discussion. We're doing actions like this all the time. We're being careless, we're being lazy, we're not thinking of others, we're harming each other all the time.
Yeah.
We're looking at one type of thing to try and understand the components that have to be involved in order for there to be a complete action, which shows a complete seed in the mind, which will cause lower realm rebirth. There's infinitely more nuance and subtle than that every second. There's no discussion about that. Of course she could be careless. That's not the discussion here. We're looking at what's in the mind. All I'm trying to point out in these examples, the point I'm trying to make in this example is the absolutely central role of intention and the absolutely central role of motivation. That's the point. That's the point. That doesn't deny what you said. That's not the discussion here. It's trying to point that out. Can you hear my point?
Yeah, I hear that.
But you're so determined your point, you can't hear my point.
Yeah, I hear.
I'm happy to talk about your point. But that's another discussion. I need you to hear this point first. And if you accept that point, fine. Now change the subject. What's your question? Change the subject now. What's your question? You have a question.
No, I
You
want
do?
to ask it.
You made your point.
I asked if because I.
Good. So now ask the question. What's the question?
Yeah, I received a teaching saying that this was one aspect with the intention, but then even if there was no intent at all, there would still be a karmic imprint from having been careless.
That's a different
stepping
discussion.
on the
That's
road.
another action. That's
Okay.
another discussion. There's a
Okay.
billion karmas every day. That's another discussion. We're discussing here the action called killing. There was no action called killing happened there. But that doesn't mean when she was drunk in the kitchen and she was careless and didn't see the mice, that's another discussion. So she has the karma of being drunk, she has the karma of being unaware, of being ignorant, of not caring. Many bad negative karmas there. We're discussing the action of killing precisely.
Okay.
You see my point?
Absolutely.
Good. Thank you. What are we communicating?
I don't know.
What are you understanding? You tell me. What are you understanding what I said?
I understand that you want to point out the importance of intention and motivation.
In actions,
and I
actions
know-
that we do.
Yeah.
An action means intention, remember?
Yeah.
In the way the Buddha describes karma and how it works.
Yeah.
Right, so we're discussing the action of
And
killing.
I didn't know if it ended there.
It's not a question of ending there, that's not the way to say it. That doesn't mean there aren't other things happening in her mind. That does not mean that she's not being careless. It doesn't mean that she's not doing other negative things. But that wasn't what we were discussing. We were discussing the particular, precise, very narrow, precise action called killing. That's what we're discussing. Trying to point out the central role of intention and motivation. There's no doubt, most of the actions we do, driving down the road, walking, breathing, we're killing beings all the time. Because we're lazy, because we don't notice, because we're self-centered, because we don't care. That's other karmas, of course. Negative karma, terrible. But it's not called killing. Because there's no intention, there's no killing. It's simple as that, but it's complex, you know? Because there's a million other things happening as well. That's it. You see the point I make? There's no question. Of course, there's karmic imprints from other things. But also, too, you could say, you know, that let's say she's a hunter. Her job is to kill, or she's a butcher or something. Her job is to kill. You could argue that there has to be some karma somehow involved, increasing her habits. You know, even though she doesn't intend to kill that particular time, because she's got a strong connection. Even a friend of mine who was a monk, and his family in Australia were like the richest butcher family. He never killed anything, but he lived on the riches of the death of hundreds of millions of beings of his family. You understand? And Lama Yeshe said to him when he became a monk, never you touch meat. So just eating meat for him, because it was connected to death of animals, wasn't so cool for him because of his connection with killing. So it's obviously more nuanced than this. It's far more subtle and intricate. But I'm trying to narrow down particular actions by analysing the components in an action, what determines what a negative action is and what a positive action is. That's what I'm trying to do. We have to be able to analyse, like your action of holding the cup. It's specific, you know. And this is the precision we have to use in the Buddha's teaching. You with me? Or does me take a bit better now? You sure?
I am sure.
Good enough. What else, people? 7:15. Yeah. Nadia.
This is a real situation. I am in a house and there is a mouse. And I think, no, I don't kill the mouse, no, I can't. But this mouse really, it's difficult to live with a mouse in your house. I don't know if you have done it in the country.
And then?
So then what happens, that someone else that is in the house decide to kill the mouse.
Then?
And me personally didn't say anything. They thought, yeah, well, maybe it's good.
So
what kind of responsibility do I have?
Come to the chase. What's the question?
What kind of responsibility do I have?
No,
is it the same responsibility?
No, obviously not. There's no intention. It's obvious. You can see the answer, Nadia. But listen, I have to ask, why do we assume that the only option, if you don't like a mouse, is to kill the mouse? If you'd had any common sense, any compassion at all, any understanding of karma, you would have realised you can't live with a mouse. You're not like the great Lama, one of my Lamas, who talked about when he was in his cave meditating, and how he said, to stop the mice from tickling my head, I have to wear a hat. Obviously you're not like that, because we're not so compassionate, and I understand. So the first thing you should do is think, how can I protect this mouse? How can I stop this mouse? I can't live with it, but how can I help this mouse get out of the way? Out of the way of a danger of a roommate who would kill it. If you had any common sense, any kindness, you would have done that. So that even though you didn't kill, it's an example of what she's saying. You were careless and didn't care about the mice. And that's what's happening all the time. So there's other karma there. Do you understand? If you thought, immediately, how can I protect this mouse? I can't live with it. I can't make it my pet, so let's put it out somewhere, give it some food, and get it away out of the house. We don't have to kill it. You know?
Yeah, but you
This is
cannot
my point,
just find the mouse in the house.
What?
It's very difficult to find the mouse. I don't want to defend these things, of course, but it's very difficult to find the mouses in the house and take them out.
Well, it's up to you how much you care. First, how much, Nadia, you understand. This is the thing about karma, okay? If say the action was called, there's food, that my rice is filled with poison food. Somebody put some poison rice in there. And you go, well, it's so difficult to pick out all, you're poor, you can't find all the rice. Well, it's so difficult to pick out all the poison rice. Like you want someone to give you permission to eat the poison rice. Well, poison rice will harm you. You don't need permission. Killing will harm you. You don't need permission. But I can't help but want someone to get us off the hook. Oh, it's so difficult to live with mice. I can't help it. It's so difficult. Can't I kill it, please? That's our view of morality, Nadia. We can't help it. But if it was going to harm you directly and you knew the rice was going to harm you, you'd rather starve than eat poison rice, because you want to die. So we don't see the consequences to ourselves. The first one is the hardest one, to recognise every action we do will bring a consequence to us. This seems like junior school, but it's so sophisticated. We just don't get this, Do you understand what I'm saying? It's a really hard one to think about. Compassion sometimes is almost easier, although it's more advanced, to see the suffering of the mouse, But the first one is to recognise everything I do, necessarily, every millisecond, will have consequences for me, like we know with food. And so we'll go to incredible lengths to look at all the things on the back of the packages. If there's even a millisecond of peanuts, you won't eat it. You'll go to great lengths to make sure there's not even a taste of peanuts, because you don't want to die. We do it when it comes to this because we do recognise there are consequences to my actions. But when it comes to this stuff, we just think it's moralistic. We want someone to give us permission. Well, aren't I allowed to do it? Mice are dirty. Oh, it's certainly going to get rid of mice. It's up to you, babe. It's up to us to think. It's not an easy one. You understand? Every action we do brings consequences to me. When we realise that, we're really grown up, I tell you. You've got to have, they say, you can't have compassion until you have renunciation. And renunciation is like compassion for yourself. Renunciation means you know why you're suffering, you know you're suffering and you're sick of it, or you don't want future suffering, but you know the causes, your own actions and your own delusions. Therefore, when you got this, you're like the most adult, content, happy, blissful, together human being. Because there's no way in the universe you'd want to do any negative action because you couldn't bear the thought of the suffering it would bring to you. That takes time. That's advanced, I tell you. And when you got that down, then you can have compassion for others. Because compassion for others is based on that. Because it's exactly the same, 2 points, but it's for others instead. You see them suffering, you go, oh my God, that suffering is unbearable. And now you know why they're suffering. The same as you, because of their karma and their delusions. Same. So His Holiness says, you can't have compassion until you have renunciation. That's why it's one step at a time. That's why you've got to think about karma in relation to oneself first, and really get in touch with it, and understand the delusions and how they cause us suffering. And this is intense hard work, you know. Really intense. Lama Zopa says, you've got renunciation when just the thought of another moment of attachment is so disgusting. It's like being in a septic tank. And that's really advanced, because we love attachment. We live in attachment. We swim in attachment. We adore attachment. So it's way to go, people. What else? Okay, let's look forward to the Heart Sutra. What can we do here? Okay, so Shariputra, because there is no attainment of wisdom, meaning there is attainment of wisdom that realizes emptiness, but it too is empty. Bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error. This is what's so fascinating. The delusions are liars. We live in lies all the time. So getting wisdom demands unbelievable clarity, unbelievable sharp mind, unbelievable analysis, unbelievable courage to go beyond error. They reach the end point of nirvana, which means the cessation of your suffering. Finally, you've seen the absence of the fantasy eye. And now, from that second, you cannot fall back. And the Buddha says, we had countless, unbelievable, amazing lives in the past. We've been in the top of all the realms. We've been wheel-turning kings. We've been amazing gods. We've been incredibly rich. We've been famous. We've been yogis. We've had compassion. We've been able to run in the sky, fly in the sky. We've had cities. We've had single point of concentration. We've never realized emptiness. That's the point where Buddha takes even more extreme. That's what we've never realized. So all the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times, past, present, future, also manifestly, completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment. In reliance on the perfection of wisdom. And that is, that's combined with compassion. It has to be. Emptiness combined with bodhicitta, that's Buddha. Emptiness on its own is liberation from suffering. But emptiness combined with bodhicitta, that's Buddha. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it's not false. So apparently, this mantra, and I haven't heard commentaries on it, but you read His Holiness, this mantra is a summary of the 5 paths. You know? The first, Tata Om Gate, apparently is the path of, what's the first one? The path of accumulation, isn't it? Forget. And Gate, path of preparation, the next steps. Then Paragate. Then Paragate is the path of seeing, when you realize emptiness. And then Parasamgate, it seems, is the next one, the path of meditation, or then the Bodhi must be the final one. But if you read His Holiness' commentary, they explain, that's where they explain the 5 stages of development through the 5 paths all the way to Buddhahood, in that mantra. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. So basically, also, it says repeatedly and continuously, on it all correctly and repeatedly. So that we take one phenomenon, like say the self or like a cup, and you realize emptiness on that, then you apply that same analysis to everything else. Once you've got it on one thing, it's easy to get it on other things. That's what they say. Because the emptiness, certainly in the Prasangika Madhyamika view, the emptiness of a self and the emptiness of phenomena is the same. Whereas in the other schools that they distinguish. They say sometimes that a self, there's no self from its own side, but there is a phenomenon. Most of them say there is a phenomenon from its own side. There are aggregates, there's something in the aggregates. That's what they do, you know. But the emptiness of self and the emptiness of phenomena from the Prasangika Madhyamika is the same. Inherent existence doesn't exist in either. Right? Have I said it? We've got another whole day tomorrow, haven't we? We're coming tomorrow, aren't we? Doing tomorrow again?
Yes, of course.
Blimey. I think it's all in one day. So we can do plenty more tomorrow. What else? Come on, ask me some questions. Please. Somebody who's never asked a question. Come on. Speak up. Please. I appreciate hearing people's views. Nobody? Nicholas.
I have a question or this one.
Okay, don't worry, ask me. Go on, darling. Sorry.
The more and more I realize how much suffering is self-created in the world, the more and more I feel it, the more and more I want to dedicate my life
Yes.
making
Amazing.
this less and less,
Well,
and going to the core ignorance. And I don't know how to, well, I'm not sure how to do this without creating suffering for the people around me who are maybe attached to me as the person.
exactly, I understand. Nicholas.
So
So in other words, you're talking about whether you should not give up sex, drugs and rock and roll and try to become a monk. Is that what you're saying? For example, is that what you're saying? Yes? Well, you know, this is where we've got to be really wise, courageous, and wise to know what is most beneficial. I mean, sometimes, you know, so many people have different karma people have. A friend of mine said he got married and had children, and then halfway through, he really realised he just wanted to be a monk. And he's like dedicated his life, but he made a decision that it was wrong to go off and leave the wife and the children. It was right that he had that relationship. So he just put it off, and he has his prayers and aspirations every day. When the time is right, now become a monk, and maybe next life, whatever, you know. Another friend of mine has a husband who's an alcoholic. She's a Buddhist, very devoted, does her practices, goes to retreats, and she thought about it, and she realised he's a quiet drunk. You know what I mean? He just sits there drunk every night quietly. He doesn't harm anybody else. He's a really sweet man, but just drinks himself to oblivion, apparently. So she made a decision that it was more beneficial to stay in the relationship for his sake, and then live her own life. She lives her own life, but she goes home, you know. So she makes a decision. Somebody else I know has given up their wife and 3 children. So each of us has to have some clarity, some wish to do what is most beneficial, and then have the courage to do it, because both ways it's going to be painful. And the fact is, so the other point is this. Because people are attached to us, there's no question they will suffer if we do something that their attachment doesn't like. There's just no question about that. But if you have really got some wisdom and long-term understanding, and the genuine wish to, the bigger point, to really be a benefit, then you will accept that, and you'll realise that you're not causing them suffering. It's their attachment that causes them suffering. But I think also part of our problem could be, and we've got to look at this, it's very painful, one of our worst attachments that can often hold us back is the attachment to what people think. So especially if you're a kind person, you look like a kind guy. You don't look like a raging, angry guy, you know? Right, you can see you're a kind man. And often with people like you, as opposed to people like me, I don't mean to be stupid now, I'm trying to just be realistic. People like you, because you're more kind and more patient, you will really consider other people's feelings, and you will sacrifice what you feel in order to help them, which is incredible. But sometimes you make, you know, it's sometimes because you don't like upsetting people, it's more, it could be more attachment to what they think. It could be. I'm not saying you at all. So for me, a kind of person, I just like a demon, just going and doing what I want to do. My poor mother crying, my sister sad, but I just had to do what I had to do. And there was a good thing in that, because I had to, you know, I was selfish, but I knew what I had to do, and I didn't mind what people thought. Because I was, You understand? I'm not trying to say I didn't have attachment to reputation, but this is one of the deepest ones inside us. And it's much harder to see it in a person who's very kind. You can't, in other words, people who are kind, you can never criticize kindness, but often, because we've all got attachment to reputation, but a person who's kind, their wish to be kind is also motivated by being seen as a good person. I'm not saying you, but it's a very subtle one and very hard. So you've got to have courage to do what is right and let people think you're wrong. Let them be upset. And it looks like you're being cruel, because the fact is you can't necessarily make people happy. You have to want to make them happy. That has to be the drive in you, but it doesn't mean you'll make them happy. Because if people have masses of attachment, you can live in the same bed and let them drink your blood, they still won't be happy. They'll still want more. And that's a very hard one. To give up, to let people have their attachment, knowing you're not doing it to them. It's your right to make decisions. It's your right to leave if you want to. Do you understand? So we've got to work out, and it's not easy sometimes. But one of the worst attachments is this. It's the subtlest, most pervasive, and the hardest to see in our minds. You know, when you read the 8 Worldly Dharmas, it's this one. The hardest one is, because we desperately want people, we want there to be peace, if you're a peaceful guy. So that also can include we call it not wanting to upset people. But perhaps it can be not wanting them to dislike me. Because we all want to be liked. This is attachment to reputation. And it's very deep inside us. And it's very interesting one to see, And that's why you just got to make prayers, and aspirations every day. May I do what's most beneficial. Have the courage to make the tough choices. And that might be, like my friend, not to become a monk. They decide to wait till next life. That's a really brave decision when all you want to do is become a monk. And equally my friend with the alcoholic husband. Or it could just as easily be to leave, I mean, look at the Buddha. He left his family. Can you imagine he was a king, a prince, leaving all his responsibilities? I mean, it doesn't feel so much because we read Buddha's life and it's way a long time ago, but there's a good example. Long-term benefit. So we've got to have the aspiration to do what's most beneficial. Have that every day like a prayer. Serious. And that's the tip. Lama Zopa says, there's this lovely saying in Tibetan, everything exists on the tip of the wish, which is intention. May I do what's most beneficial? May I do what's most beneficial? And what that will do, that intention, is nourish the karmic seeds you've already planted to do what's most beneficial, and then one day you'll go, oh, there it is, and you will do it, guaranteed. And the conditions will come together.
So
But that's all. Be brave. Yeah.
You say there's no beginning and there's no end.
The Mahayana view would say that, no end.
And could you once say that our minds are all the same age?
You could say that, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful.
You could say that,
Yeah.
for sure. You could say that. But it doesn't necessarily mean in terms of maturity. If we've had a lot of lives in the lower realms and come into the human world a bit thick and stupid.
Yeah.
Some people have done more practice and coming more advanced. So yeah, same age. It's true. It's very true. In relation back to Nicholas's point, it's interesting. I remember reading about this Australian nurse in England who worked with the dying. And she wrote this book called The 5 Greatest Regrets of the Dying. And she said, the greatest regret, this is very fascinating, I didn't follow my heart. I didn't do what I really wanted, what was right. I did what I thought other people expected of me. And that's what this attachment to reputation is. And it's so instinctive we don't notice it. And in fact, it's what's determining most of our choices, especially for a kind person. And I'm not criticising that, It's incredible to be kind, but it's very hard to see that kindness can be also motivated by not to upset the apple cart, to make everything peaceful, to keep everything nice, Because we can't, because peaceful people don't like, your aversion, in other words, doesn't like things to be all upset, And that can be an attachment, very strong attachment. Do you understand my point? Whereas me in my life, I could see kind of arrogant and self-centered, and I didn't mind it was chaos. I didn't worry me if it was chaos, So if I caused it as well, it's okay, I figured I'd put my right. So my mother, my darling mother, she was so kind, she had 7 children. And I was this raging child, very devoted to God when I was a kid. And then as I got older, I went off and gave up God. Decided at 19 years old, it was goodbye God, hello boys. And she cried, tried to get me to go back to Mass, and she cried. Because I didn't do what my mother wanted. I did what I wanted, which is a good thing, I had to do it. Then I became this raging hippie. After that, and she cried. And then I started getting into black politics, and she cried. Then I started becoming a lesbian. I thought men were the problem. Then she cried about that. And then I got to become a Buddhist and she really cried. She knew she'd lost me by that point. But every time, next day, she'd make a phone call like as if nothing had happened. She was amazing, my dear mother, so kind. But I didn't ever want to try. I was cruel to my mother, but also I knew it was my right as a human being. It's true, it's a fact. It's not selfish. It's right. I have a right as a human being to make choices. Of course, wise choices. And if you look at the Mahayana one, bodhicitta, Nicholas, that's long term. In other words, even you could argue, a mother, let's say, would be really criticised if she went off and left her children for 3 months to go and study a particular course so she could be more qualified to help educate her children. Her long-term view is more powerful, but she'd be criticised. Well, that's motivation, Your motivation is a hidden thing to most other people. But if you've got a truly pure motivation to want to become a Buddha to benefit others, you're going to benefit millions of people rather than just through your mummy and daddy and your wife. So long-term motivation is very powerful, but it's not evident to other people. You've got to have courage to make that choice. I was selfish, but I found it easier to make that choice, and in the end it turned out right. Because I didn't care so much what people thought. Or meaning I wasn't so attached to whether they got upset or not. I kind of had a sense it was their problem. Which sounds selfish. But you see my point though, you see my point. When some of my sisters spend their life trying to make everything nice in the house, I just seem to disrupt everything, But there's a good side to that, because you understand. You understand my point. We know our own mind, Very tricky. There's attachment to reputation, attachment to what people think of us. It's every second. It's determining most of our choices. We don't realise it's so subtle. We're always adjusting our behaviour to make sure we're seen in the right light. Which is why we try to hide our bad things and make sure people see our good things. It's just instinct, it's ego, How we defend ourselves. All the time it's like this, all the time. Little things, embarrassing things. You go to the toilet and somebody just before you has left a really shitty smell. And you go just to have a pee, and you walk out, and the next person comes in, you're dying to tell them it's not your piss, not your shit. Little baby things, you know what I'm trying to say? We're trying to cover ourselves to be seen in the right light. We can't bear to be seen as bad. This is how it is all the time. You don't want to be seen to be the wrong person, Like you're even driving down the road, listen to this, and the car behind you toots you. You get upset. Why? You don't even know them, they're a stranger, but they're getting annoyed with you. You don't like being, you don't like people not liking you. You feel upset because they've distorted at you. You know what? Your loneliness. Look at loneliness. This sounds very hard. Think about this. This shows our low self-esteem. This shows the depth of our attachment. Our need. This shows the craving we have and the assumption we have that if other people think I'm nice, I must be nice. So loneliness is when you have no one to hear your thoughts. So why would we think that our thoughts are valuable only when someone else hears them? You think about it. It's completely irrational, but that's the depth of ego. The need to be seen and heard by others in order to verify that I'm valuable. This is this attachment to reputation. It's so primordial. It's really almost like the closest to ego grasping. That's why they say the greatest yogis up in the mountains have given up everything, but they're still thinking of what the people in the village are thinking about them. This is the last one to go. It's the hardest one, which is why they say when you do retreat, you act like a thief. You go off and you not only don't see anybody, but you don't let them see you. That's the greatest yogis. Of course in the West that's called autistic. You understand? It's called mentally ill. But it's the only way to rip ego out, Because this one of attachment to what people think of us is so primordial. It's scary when we start to see it. Because it determines most of our choices. And so I'm saying, when you're a nice person, it's much harder to see. Because it looks like you're being kind. Yeah. I think we should finish. Enough is enough. It's only 20 to 8. I talk faster than most people. I always quote, I'm so sorry, you've heard it before, I'm so boring. But apparently, I always say this. I always tell people this story. Years ago in Queensland, in Australia, the centre in Brisbane invited 3 of us nuns who lived up north, 100 kilometres north at Chenrezig Institute. There's a nunnery up there. To come down to Brisbane to give an hour-and-a-half talk. We go each Tuesday, so we did. And they transcribed the 3 talks, the 90-minute talks. Well, the other 2 nuns were 8 pages and mine were 24. It's very funny. Good. So I feel I've given you my money's worth. Look. It's about 11 p.m. by now, okay? I always joke about that. I'm so very stupid. Okay. So let's get Kate. Thinking there's been any benefit of all these ideas, There's been seeds planted. We've sown thousands of seeds actually. So we think maybe we nourish these seeds from this moment forward with our practice, with our effort, with our courage, with our clarity, with our wisdom, so that we can become the Buddha that is our natural attention. No matter how long it takes, it doesn't matter. For the sake of every single suffering sentient being. We think like that. And may compassion grow and grow in the hearts of all. Lama Sangye Drugyurne Drova Chikyan Malupa Jai Salar Gurmasho Jangchot Samcho Rinpoche Ma ke panam ke gyuchi ke panyam pa me payam gom ne gom du pamasho. And may we never develop, even for a moment, wrong views towards the deeds of our most precious lovers. With faith and respect gained from seeing their goodness, may their full inspiration flow into our hearts. May they live long lives, because we need them badly on this earth, all the holy beings. Okay.